The Mask of the Oni. In ancient Japan, during the Edo period, a samurai was given immense skill and power by an Oni in exchange for his soul, as he was consumed by great hatred, and the more of his opponents he defeated in battle, and innocents he murdered as sacrifice to his master, the more invincible he became. Soon, he was after the shogunate himself, but he didn't really want to rule Japan. He just wanted to be the most powerful and unbeatable swordsman alive. Unfortunately, his rampage didn't last long. An angel was dispatched from heaven to put to an end the terror his Oni master had unleashed through him. The angel was a seraph, and she came to earth in human form. There, in ancient Japan, she searched out the chosen champion and found a middle-aged craftsman suffering and gravely ill from semi-blindness. Despite this, the angel chose him for the goodness of his heart and pitied him, as despite being alone, he continued to struggle with his everyday life. Thus, the two champions had been chosen. Each was given a unique blade to wield. The Oni had given the samurai the accursed blade of wrath, while the craftsman received from the angel the divine blade of destiny. Each had to learn 8 special skills of their own, 8 evil characteristics for the blade of wrath, and 8 divine virtues for the blade of destiny. Each of them both powerful in their own way, on the opposite sides of the scale between good and evil. Thus, the seraph and the Oni shall meet in the battlefield, in a place between life and death, to be represented by their champions in a fight to the end. Ancient Japan, Edo period. On the outskirts of a small village west of Kyoto, in the fading light of dusk, 2 men, both tired and exhausted, faced each other in mortal combat. The fight had lasted for the best of the afternoon, but this was no ordinary samurai fight. The 2 men stood around 13 feet apart. Each one stood inside a circle of chalk thrown on the ground. Both were fully armored and armed to the teeth, yet reluctant to leave their respective circles. No one saw them. No one heard them, but themselves and themselves alone, as they were both in a place which could only be described as between life and death. One was shrouded in light, his red armor glinting as if being hit by the rays of the sun. He held his katana tightly, hands trembling, yet his will was strong. Sweat trickled down his forehead, as he focused at his opponent with one squinted eye. His name was Satoshi Ichihiro, and he was half blind. He was not a samurai by birth, yet he had been chosen to be the champion of life. Within the other circle stood a formidable samurai whose soul had been devoured by anger. His armor was as black as the darkest night, and his katana glinted with the red light of blood. He hissed at his opponent, snarling with loathsome wrath, which heightened the effect already produced by his ugly mask. It was a mask of an Oni, a mask of a demon. His name was Yamada Senkai. Yamada was a warrior. He had killed many armed men as well as innocent men, women, and children. He had given up his very soul to his master, the Oni, to become one, if not the most powerful feared swordsman of his time. He killed without remorse, offering the blood of his victims to the demon that owned him. There was but one hindrance to his continued dominance, and he had every intention of getting rid of the person once and for all. He raised his blade and with one quick swing slashed the deadly evil of lust at his opponent. The sound of thunder crackled as Satoshi staggered backward, only to regain his balance by dropping to one knee lest he be thrown out of his circle. He staggered unsteadily to his feet, still gripping the tsuka of his katana tightly. The blow had considerably weakened him. He had spent more than a year learning and mastering the virtues, but he had no adequate protection at hand against lust. He had used temperance against gluttony earlier during the fight, which sufficed to say almost threw Yamada out of his circle. This time around, his opponent delivered his own brand of payback. The black samurai sneered once again. "The next strike, Sato, you will die. No one else will then oppose me," he yelled. He had one evil left, his most powerful one, Rat, the name of his master, that which fueled him to get stronger and stronger by the day. He felt it. He wallowed in it. "I will kill you all," he whispered. He raised his sword once again for the final blow. Satoshi tried to focus despite the sinking feeling expanding within him. He had felt the desire for her who had given him the gifts, the beautiful seraph who had chosen him to be her champion. No, not the angel, but her beautiful human form. The young woman who had lately accompanied and guided him through his disabled life. Sato shook his head. "You better help me with this one, Nanako. You know I'm no Date Masumune," he whispered. "Hey!" He heard her voice behind him, though she was nowhere in sight. He had one virtue left, and he had lost count of the evils that Yamada had thrown at him. Yamada swung his sword in anger once again. Blood-red light emanated from the katana. Sato swung his blade to counter the attack as an intense yellow light intersected and sliced through the red, hitting Yamada at dead center forehead. He screamed, staggered, and fell out of his circle. There was a flash and a sound of thunder. Then darkness and silence. The wind blew. The yellow light of the moon engulfed the empty field. Sato sheathed his sword as he sank to the ground, whispering a short prayer to both God and the blessed Jesus. He was so tired and very thirsty. Charity was the last virtue he had, and he was so grateful that it worked. He heard footsteps. He was back in the real world. Nanako and an old abbot approached him. "Do you have anything to drink? And can I get out of this circle?" he asked. "Yes, you can," the abbot said, and handed him a bowl. Sato gulped the liquid, then suddenly spit it out. "I asked for water and you give me sake? But that's all I've got," the drunkard of an abbot replied sheepishly. Nanako then placed her hand on Sato's shoulder and reminded him of the mask. Wearily, he got up and walked to where Yamada once was. Instead of the Oni circle, the ground was blackened with ash, and in the middle of it was the terrifying, hideous Oni mask. "I hope you're happy where you are, Yamada," he whispered as he grabbed the mask. He then walked back to the abbot and handed him the evil thing. The abbot took out a sacred cloth and started to wipe the mask till it turned gold in the moonlight. He then wrapped it in the cloth and placed it in a wooden box with a lock. "And you had to make it shine?" Sato muttered. "Go home, Sato. God knows you need the rest," answered the abbot, handing him the jug of sake. Nanako hugged him tight and whispered, "Arigato, Sato-san," then walked with the abbot towards the village temple. Sato took a swig from the jar. He didn't care. He was thirsty. He watched the two vanish in the distance with the only eye he had left to see. He listened to the silence and the breeze of the wind. He was still trembling as he staggered slowly towards the village, using a fallen tree branch for a walking stick. He could have sworn he heard Yamada sneer once again, then laughter, an ugly, demonic laughter, very, very far away. Modern Japan. 10 years ago, the city of Kyoto, as part of an expansion project in urban development, which included unused land on the outskirts of the city, an old dilapidated temple was being torn down. The temple was finally turned over to the city government after its long-time caretaker, an old abbot, passed away. Despite wanting to preserve the place, the temple had long been forgotten, as Kyoto was known for the massive amount of temples all over and beyond the city itself. The temple had to go, so everything of value was collected, inventoried, and archived. During the construction work, a very old wooden box was unearthed. It was still locked despite the wood starting to crumble on the outside. It was laid to rest on what appeared to be a small crypt sealed under stone and granite several feet below the temple grounds, right under an equally ancient stone statue of Jesus Bodhisattva. Without being opened, the box was sent to the closest museum where it could be identified, inventoried, and correctly archived. The lock could not be jiggled, so the museum staff was forced to carefully crack open the dilapidated wood, revealing an equally dilapidated cloth wrapped around an old bronze mask. The mask was terrifying, yet the staff was used to this sort of thing. After all, it was an Oni mask. All they needed to do was find out how old it was and what was it doing buried under temple grounds. Both the wood from the box and the tattered cloth was sent for radiocarbon testing to get an estimate of the date, as historical records were searched regarding an incident in the past which could pertain to the mask. The carbon dating came out as mid-Edo period, but there were no accounts as to why the mask was found where it was. The only best source of possible information would be the old abbot, who was already probably enjoying perpetual enlightenment wherever he was. So, the mask remained in the museum and was added to the display collection of old ancient masks. But you see, the mask was hunted. Over a period of 6 years, the mask would disappear from the display by itself and reappear at various random places in the museum storage area. At first, the employees blamed it to somebody probably making a mistake, and the mask would be returned to the display only to disappear again. This not only happened once or even a few times, it happened again and again and again. What more, whoever tried to wear the mask would come down with an extreme case of flu and off and on headaches which lasted for days as if cursed. Finally, the museum staff gave up on it altogether, and the mask of the Oni was placed on a box, locked and put away into storage for everyone to simply forget. 4 years later, a young man visiting Japan from the US wanders into the very same museum. Inside the box, in storage, the Oni mask starts to glow. You can hear the mask. The mask has once again come to life after being buried for hundreds of years. The Oni had chosen his champion once again, and an age-old war would begin anew its full circle. In the ether, in a place between life and death, two circles 13 feet apart begin to glow. They too have been awakened after so many years of slumber. The Kenjutsu duel between good and evil will begin once again.